Good morning. Excited to be back. I think it was a very productive bye week for us. Our guys were able to step back a little bit, and just excited to get back on the field this week and face a great opponent that's playing good football at the moment. So really excited, great energy. You know, the biggest thing I'm asking of our guys here in this condensed 4-game season really is the urgency to be really high, and let's go out there and attack this final stretch of our schedule.
Microphones on both sides.
Jim, you're in this new role now for a month, 3 games in. I'm just curious, in your mind, have you come to any conclusions like, you know what, I like this gig, I'm capable of handling this, and I want this in 2023 and beyond? Or are there any questions that you still in your mind need answered about that?
I think number one, I know I'm capable. It's been really exciting for me to see the response of the coaches, of the players, and it's been exciting just to see, you know, certain little changes you've made and kind of the buy-in of the messaging and the play on the field. It's exciting for me to see all of that because it obviously could have went a different direction. So I know I'm capable of it. I would be excited for the opportunity, and it's fun to get the chance to really affect some change this season and see what we can get done, knowing that a lot of the big changes that would have to happen are really coming after the season if I were to get this position. So it's been an exciting opportunity for me, and hopefully we finish this season out the right way and things take care of itself.
So no question in your mind that you need answered yet about your ability to do this?
No question on my ability to. It's what's the right structure. Right? Who's involved? What does that look like? What is my role on the day-to-day? That's really the only questions that I would have of what would be best for the program in a lot of cases, and what direction do things need to go. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. There's things that we need to do better. There's ways we need to adapt and update some things, but we don't need to start from ground zero. You know, the foundation and what this place is and how Wisconsin has won is strong. We just have to get back to detailing up the things that need to be done better, and that would be a lot of the emphasis going forward.
Jim, you mentioned when you took over that offensively, you hope to figure out ways to help the playmakers be a bit more dynamic. It would appear that Jim Ray and Skylar have been able to do that, certainly have had their moments throughout the season. What specifically stands out about what those two have been able to do to become better downfield threats and some of those dynamic playmakers?
I think the number one thing that steps out to me when you watch those two play is how they're attacking everything. You know, they're putting pressure on DBs, and anytime you see guys kind of stop thinking or overthinking, maybe is a better term, and just reacting, causing problems, making DBs respond to what you're doing, you kind of know that receivers are taking a huge step in their progression, and those two have done it really all year. When you watch some of the separation and the production that they're having, I think it's always exciting as a defensive guy, and makes you nervous, right, when you're starting to see just that play speed increase and the consistency of how players attack and forcing DBs to respond to you. And they've done that for the majority of the season, and it's really exciting to see.
Jim, Hunter Wohler not on the injury report for the first time in a while. Do you expect to have him one? And how do you reintegrate him into a defense that have gotten some pretty good play from the guys that you've had back there?
It is exciting. Going to have Hunter available for this week. And last week was huge for him to be able to hit the field a couple times and not have to play on Saturday. So he was able to get on the field, get some reps, work through some things physically just to find out where he's at, the confidence he has in his leg, and then be able to step back for a couple days and rest and get some treatment, and he'll be able to attack this week. So it is exciting when you add another piece that was a productive player in your defense and really had a huge fall camp, excited about what he was going to do this season. And now it's what's the best combination that we can use. Like you said, we've had some great production out of Moe and out of Torch. So it's finding the right balance with those guys, and down the stretch hopefully will help us keep them fresh and be able to rotate through a little bit like I traditionally do. And I'm excited for the prospects of getting all three of them on the field at times, whether that's together or just rotating and keeping guys fresh throughout the game.
Got another injury question for you. Looked like Hayden Rucci wasn't on the list as well. Is he going to be good to go for Saturday, and how have you kind of seen his rehab going?
Very exciting today to see a number of faces that haven't been on the field in a while. Hayden being one. Riley Mullman obviously played last week in more of a limited capacity, but we have the possibility of getting a number of guys back this week in bigger roles than they've been able to manage here going down the last 2 or 3 weeks. So it's exciting. I think there's still going to be a little bit of game time decision or as the week progresses, kind of finding out how big of a role some of these guys can have coming off of injuries. But just the fact that we think that a number of guys can be available that have not been in really a big capacity in a while, that's exciting here for this last stretch of the season.
Jim, you mentioned a couple of times that we wanted to get to the bye week and maybe have some bigger conversations and make some changes. Was there anything that you identified that you wanted to tweak or change going into this last month of the year?
Not huge changes going forward. There still has to be that week-to-week, day-to-day mentality on the football field, right? There's not huge changes that are going to happen. The personnel, right, will help change things. If you can get some guys back healthy, that will obviously open up some of the things that we can do schematically. But we tweaked that practice structure a few weeks ago, and I like what we were doing. We'll continue to adapt as the season goes on to give them what they need. But the focus will be on fresh coming down the stretch on game day, and that's what we need. I'm excited for this little run. Hopefully we can maintain the momentum that we had coming out of Purdue, and that was the message to the guys today was urgency, right? Sometimes when you come off a bye, you have to be careful of walking through the beginning part of the week and just feeling good about yourself. Like, we're going to push these guys to snap back into it, and I think they responded well today, just in a walkthrough setting. Just the focus, the urgency was there, and we have to hit that every day. And when we get to game, it's unique because the other team's coming off a bye as well, right? That doesn't always happen. So we're both ahead of the game planning because there was no new football this last weekend. But I'm excited. A little bit different approach with the guys, just because as coaches you're a little bit ahead of the game plan. So I'm excited for this challenge, and it's a team with some dynamic athletes on both sides of the ball, and we gotta get them a great plan to go execute.
Coach, it's felt like Jake Chaney has been playing some really good football for you. I know going into the season you felt like you were going to use 4 inside linebackers anyway, but why did maybe he initially not get a starting job, and what's he shown you over the last 3 weeks where his snaps have really increased and he's become a big part of this defense?
Yeah, very excited of what Jake's done. Coming out of camp, it was a big-time battle, and we felt like we had 4 guys that not only could play, that we needed to play. And we thought Muma coming out of camp had done enough to win that position, and at the same time knew you were going to rotate. And then we've had some injury battles really all across that 4 guys who've played and been productive for us. And when he's been healthy, Jake has been very consistent. He's a fun player to coach because his focus is extremely high, and his consistency in play has been there kind of week in and week out in whatever role we've asked him to do. So excited coming down the stretch that we quite possibly have these guys as healthy as they've been all season as a group, and just trying to find a way to make them most impactful on defense as well as the role that they're going to have on special teams.
Jim, I know we're asking you a lot of questions about the future, and it's hard to know those answers, but I'll ask this question anyway. You talked about kind of what your vision could be, and that you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and there's small changes. But big picture, if you should be the head coach moving forward permanently, what do you think needs to change with this program, or at least be different to get it to the level that you hope to get it to down the road?
Yeah, that's a big question right there. You're asking the big ones today. I think, number one, this place has always been about the culture and the players. We have to get back to doing that a little bit better. I think we let some things slip a little bit, and just a little bit of gray, and want to make sure we eliminate that in every capacity, right? Whether that's coach to player, coach to coach, the messaging coming from the building. This place means a ton to me, and want to make sure that we do everything the right way, right? And hold these guys accountable to what the standards of Wisconsin are, and I'm excited about that. And there are a lot of big things that would be, it's up in the air. Like, what direction do you take, whether it's defensively, what my role would be, offensively, right? What is the plan going forward? There's still a lot of big things that I don't have an answer for at this point, and I don't need an answer for at this point, but there's a lot of conversations that I've had, and I'm excited about what could happen in the future. And really last week kind of mentioned it was the first time that I addressed kind of the yearly plan with our team and with the coaches a little bit. And I think it just helped put them at ease, right? Understanding that a lot of this stuff does not change right now, but his thoughts are there, right? I have a lot of thoughts on what we can do better. Number one being that player development side. You know, if it truly is about the guys and how you develop on and off the field, going to put a lot of resources into that, making sure our players have the right people around them all day, every day, kind of in all areas of being a student athlete. So that would be a huge emphasis that hopefully would change for the better.
Jim, you've been asked about recruiting several times, about, you know, how you get kids to come here if there's uncertainty. When you guys were on the road this past week, did you get questions like that from recruits about, okay, did they ask you, can you shed any light on what the future is going to be like and why I should still go there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge question. A lot of these players we have a great relationship with, and they like what we're telling them about Wisconsin. There's true, genuine interest, and, you know, like we said, we push the culture and the people. So when there's a huge question mark on who's going to be involved, obviously the kids are very much hesitant on what we're saying, and it's a great response. These kids know what University of Wisconsin is traditionally, athletically, right? What we've done on the field, as well as the academic piece and what we push from a development standpoint. They all love that. Well, there's enough uncertainty that you're getting people to just step back and try to play it out. And I think having somewhat of a timeline here within the next month or so helps. You have to ask for a little bit of patience in a number of situations, whether there's the 23 class that, you know, you have the early signing day in December, the transfer portal opening up in December, or even that second signing period. It's all right around the corner. It's a very difficult time to ask for a little bit of patience, but it's what we have to do. And we've gotten great responses from the kids, from the families, and in a number of ways, you're hearing, like, if this thing plays out the way that maybe I hope it does, we're going to be in good shape, and we'll find out. But, I mean, number one thing, we have to go win. We have to continue to play well and show improvement and win games down the stretch, and that will handle a lot of this.
2 questions, if I could. Hey, happy 40th birthday, by the way. Welcome to the dark side of almost middle-aged. Is that honestly an advantage, though, that you're a younger guy? Can you use that? That's my first question. Can you use kind of your youth and energy and kind of being in the know to your advantage?
Wouldn't never say I'm that cool, but I mean, to me, it's energy, right? You have to be able to match, you know, high school, college players' energies, and I think I do a good job of that and being real. The number one response I think you're getting from high school coaches and high school athletes, even young college players, a lot of them feel like they're getting lied to. There is a lot of mixed messaging in recruiting right now, and the more honest and real, even if it's something they don't want to hear, right? The more open and honest and real you are with guys, it goes a long ways, and that's how I try to treat our players when they get here. But it starts in the recruiting process with their coaches, their families. There is a lot of gray because there is a lot of situations where you're recruiting a lot of people that you have to. And the unique part about college football is they have to pick you in the end, right? So it goes that way a lot of times of, well, they've only got these many people this on their roster, or they continually they have to pick us, right? So you're recruiting a lot of kids, and a lot of the ones you really love go other places, and that's the nature of the business. But I think the more open and honest of the timeline and kind of where kids stand in that process, they respect it. And I think that's the number one thing that I try to get across early on and carry it over all throughout our college players' careers. You might not always like the answer. Sometimes you will, but we gotta tell it to these kids straight, and they respect that in this process. And whether that's, I don't think that's a youth thing. I think that's more of a respect thing, and having that direct approach, being confident. I'm very confident in who I am and the people I surround myself with. I think they feel that. I don't really think it has anything to do with age, because you see older coaches having success doing the same thing. Obviously, they might have a little bit more of a resume that helps them, but I think that to me is the more important side of it, is the being honest, being open with who you are and what your plan is.
And I'd like to ask you a question about interceptions. Usually that's on defense when you get them. That's a risk versus reward. It's always a gamble. But I wonder if you coach it a certain way. Do you scout the opponent and then look for more opportunities? Or what do you draw from your personal background of being successful in this area to obviously emphasize it so well with your team?
Well, turnovers are obviously a huge part of defense, and that's the very obvious part of football, right? If you're winning the turnover battle, you have a greater chance of winning, and every team in America is going to emphasize creating turnovers. And as you mentioned, it is a little risk reward. I think we're very calculated on the risks that we take. I think it's very important to understand what your philosophy is and what type of players you have. Are they players that are more of that man-to-man challenge? You might not get all the interceptions, or are you a vision break team, right? How good are your players reading the quarterback? Type of pressure can you create in both situations? So there's definitely a lot of risk reward in how you try to create turnovers, and I think we've got some special kids that understand timing. They understand our scheme really well. When we can mix and match the pressures that we create, it's not always about sacks. It's how are you affecting how comfortable the quarterback is. I think we've done a great job at times this year of really affecting quarterbacks and what they see and how they think, and the timing that they want to play with. There's a lot of factors that go into this, but I feel like we're very calculated in the risks that we take, and we want our players to be confident and aggressive in situations when they're the guy to have an opportunity to go make a play.
We have time for a couple more, Will. Jim, you've mentioned having a sense of urgency a couple times. Have you seen that waiver / is that hard to create when some of the preseason goals are maybe out of reach now?
I think there was a stretch. You take that Ohio State, Illinois stretch, I think we had a lot of guys questioning things and maybe not believing or trusting kind of what the plan is, or some of our really good players, I think, trying to do too much, right, and overcome by doing a little bit too much. And I think they've settled down. When the crazy news with Coach Christ happened, I think it made everyone step back. And once we got through the emotions of that, like I said, the messaging earlier in the day was like consistency, right? We have good kids who want to outwork people. I think sometimes you got to get them to understand that there's so much more than that, right? You can't be playing from behind. It's not always from the first step of the play, just try to outwork the guy across from you. You got to win the technical battle. You have to be smart. You got to play with your eyes and your hands and your feet. And then once you're in control, now go outwork them, right, and finish. So I think just making sure the processing was there, right? We had some players, I think, and some with youth, right, as you're a better athlete than the guy across from you for a long time in your life. I'm just going to outwork you and you can't handle it. It's not the case, right, at this level. You have to be smarter than that. You have to be willing to put in the time to really learn how to dominate, learn how to control the play. And I think they've really focused on that. That's been my messaging from kind of day one moving forward, and I think our guys have really bought into that, which has helped with the consistency and the buy-in.
Jim, with your defenses having to go against these three players, with the class of 2020, you had offensive linemen like Jack Nelson, Trey Wadig, Tanner Bornolini. Now they're have been in starting roles this year. They've been contributing, and obviously Jack and, well, they've all moved around too. Just what have you seen from their development and what's made them able to contribute and play at the level they're playing right now?
It's fun to see young guys grow up, and consistency helps, right? If you're able to play consistent positions, that development might happen a little bit faster. That has not been able to be the case with those guys. So I think as you're seeing them settle into, one, kind of who they are physically right now, mentally what they can handle, and just you see the confidence growing week in and week out just with the more experience that they're getting. And like I said, anytime you see younger players kind of coming into their own and developing kind of that confident mindset that you saw coming out of high school, it's exciting for coaches, and especially with the transition of offensive line coaches and the number of injuries, they've had to learn a lot, and there's been a lot on their plate that maybe you hoped wouldn't be there week in and week out, but there are three guys that you mentioned. Just the confidence that's starting to grow throughout the course of the season is really exciting for coaches.
Jim, you spoke a couple weeks ago about Graham's development and just how he's playing. I just wondered, if, as the head coach, have you learned anything about him maybe off the field that maybe you didn't just have a chance to as a DC before? Is there anything that stood out to you about how he approaches the week to week?
I think number one is his desire to be a leader for this team. He wants to be vocal. He wants to hold people accountable, and I think he struggled how to do that when there was times he was the guy struggling, right? And anytime you start to grow as a player, and all we asked him to do is get better in all ways. And now I think he's more confident, and he's been having the production and playing well. That obviously helps you just settle down and trust the people around you. But number one, I think it's that growth, the consistency of his decision making. I think he's gaining a lot of confidence. He's seen so much now, right, from different teams. You're looking at a lot of these teams he's played. It's the second or third time now that he's been the quarterback. He's kind of got a little bit better feel of the week-to-week game planning and the things that need to change, and just kind of the styles of defenses that he's going to see in the Big Ten. So I think all of that leads to his growth. And I think one thing that I just asked Bobby Ingram to say, like, don't ask him what he likes, ask him what he'd call. Like very little differences in messaging. Most quarterbacks like your plan, right? They're bought into what you're doing, but when it's on the line and you got to make a throw, what would you call? And I think that's important for quarterbacks and coordinators to really understand that it shows you what they trust, especially in big moments when you need to make a play. Like giving him a little bit of ownership on, not necessarily that he's calling it on game day, but throughout the week, and you're going through these situations. I think as a coordinator, if you have some things that are 50-50 calls, really getting inside the quarterback's head that way kind of helps you make decisions on game day.